So when I initially wrote and shot this video, it was actually before the deal had gone through, and it seemed like the Twitter board was going to put up a really big fight to prevent it from actually happening. I was not going to post this video after the deal was actually announced, but I realized that it actually does a really good job explaining why the board had no choice but to go through with the deal. So with that being said, let's get the video rolling. What is going on, guys? Nick here, back with another video. I'm about to show you guys something that you don't want to see.
Learning to prioritize and care for ourselves is never ending, but that's the beauty of self-care.
Windows 11 makes things easier.
These are ads from TikTok. And these are ads from Instagram. I promise the torture is almost over. Look at these last set of ads. What do you notice that's very different about these ads? Well, they kinda suck. And it's not that they did something wrong with the marketing or that they drew up a bad ad. They just aren't very appealing. They aren't presented in a way that captures the user's attention. And for most users, they just become background noise. Twitter's business, like most social media businesses, is focused around selling ads. And for a $34 billion business built around selling ads, they sure are pretty bad at it. For years, Twitter's business has struggled to effectively monetize themselves. They've actually only turned a profit twice for their entire existence. Let that sink in. Twice. But these 2 years shouldn't even really count. In both years that they turned a profit, it was entirely because of a tax benefit they received where they took in $1 billion. And since then, they've gone back to losing money. Now, you probably already know who this is, but this is Elon Musk. He's one of PayPal's OG founders and also the guy who turned the car industry on its head. Oh yeah, and the rocket industry on its head too. Well, Elon is not too happy with the way that Twitter is running their business. In 2 tweets, the first coming on March 25th, Elon polled his 83 million followers, asking, "Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle?" 70.4 of the 2 million respondents answered no. The next day, Elon responded to this poll and said given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. What should be done? Well, we didn't have to wait too long to find out what Elon would do. It turns out that Elon had been buying anywhere from 500,000 to 2.5 million shares of Twitter a day since January 31st, almost 2 months before he polled his followers about their views of Twitter's handling of free speech on the platform. Twitter immediately announced that they would appoint their now biggest shareholder to the board of directors. And as part of the agreement, Elon would not become the owner of more than 14.9% of the company's stock. Now, this is where things really heated up. After meeting and having discussions with the Twitter board, Elon ended up not joining after all. Instead, a week later, shown in an SEC filing, Elon had made a very big proposal. Via text exchange with Twitter chairman Bret Taylor, he wrote, "As I indicated this weekend, I believe that the company should be made private to go through the changes that need to be made. After the past several days of thinking this over, I have decided that I want to acquire the company and take it private. I'm gonna send you an offer letter tonight. It will be public in the morning. Are you available to chat?" Apparently they did speak after this, and Elon told Taylor the following: "I am not playing a back and forth game. I have moved straight to the end. It's a high price and your shareholders will love it. If the deal doesn't work, given that I don't have confidence in the management, nor do I believe that I can drive the necessary changes in the public market, I would need to reconsider my position as a shareholder. This is not a threat. It is simply not a good investment without the changes that need to be made, and those changes won't happen without taking the company private." Unsurprisingly, the Twitter board didn't like to hear that Elon thought they were incompetent and that he intended to buy the company away from them. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a board of directors is, it's basically a governing body elected by shareholders. Basically, their job is to make sure that the company is well run and that the shareholders' long-term interests are protected. Now, Twitter's board of directors is chaired by Bret Taylor, who's the co-CEO of Salesforce. It also has Parag Agrawal, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, who's one of the founders of Twitter and the original CEO, who also plans to leave in May of 2022, Mimi Alamehu, Senior Vice President at MasterCard, Egon Durbin, Silver Lake co-CEO, along with a few other tech CEOs. They're all very experienced and high-credentialed business and tech executives, but all of them have something else in common. This is the list of the shares owned by each member of the board. Jack Dorsey has the most with about 18 million shares worth almost $900 million. The second largest shareholder is Ahmad Kordestani, who owns 934,000 shares worth $45 million. Parag Agrawal, Twitter's current CEO, owns 507,000 shares worth $24 million at today's price, and the next few are between 20 to 100,000 shares, currently worth somewhere between $1 to $5 million. Elon Musk criticized the board in a tweet where he said, "A huge problem with the Twitter board is they don't own any shares and that their interests aren't aligned with shareholders." But that started to get me thinking. $5 million is a lot of stock for somebody to own. But maybe in comparison to Elon Musk, who's worth $206 billion, that might not seem like a lot. I was wondering what these people are worth and how much of their net worth is made up of Twitter shares. So I started looking it up for myself, and it turns out, yeah, Elon was right. This guy right here, Brett Taylor, the chairman of Twitter's board, owns 56,000 shares worth $2.7 million. And to me, an average Joe, and probably to a lot of you guys, 2.7 million of a stock is a lot to own. But Brett Taylor is worth 221 million. That means that his stake in Twitter is actually 1.25% of his entire net worth. Now, the average American has a net worth of about $121,000. So that would be the equivalent of the average person owning 1,500 worth of Twitter. Of the 9 board members that I was able to find the net worth of, 8 of them have less than 3.5% of their entire net worth tied up in Twitter stock. And to me, this says a lot. First off, if you have such small positions of your net worth tied up in Twitter stock, and yeah, I know they have fiduciary responsibilities, but how invested are you really in making sure that Twitter is providing long-term value to the shareholders? And the second thing is, if you really believe in what you're doing for Twitter as a business and for the shareholders, there's just no way that you would have such tiny positions in the company. And I'm not just saying that to be a board member that you have to have skin in the game. I'm saying that if you really believed in what you're doing for Twitter and you really thought that it was a great investment, wouldn't you be buying up shares? It's like running a restaurant and not wanting to eat the food that you serve. Now, after Elon put out this criticism, Jack Dorsey, one of the founders of Twitter, responded to this claim. He said that it's consistently been the dysfunction of the company. And this is a pretty big statement. He's one of the company's founders, he's been on the board for 15 years, and he isn't really allowed to publicly criticize the board because of his fiduciary responsibility and all of the bylaws that come with being a board member. But he's telling you guys, yeah, you nailed it. This board of directors is a total mess and you should not trust it. Alarm bells should be going off if you're a shareholder. So after all of this, the board of directors, you know, the ones that are responsible for making sure that the long-term shareholder interests are protected and that the business is being well run, they received an offer from Elon Musk to buy the company for $43 billion. In response, this board adopted a shareholder rights plan, which has been referred to as a poison pill. Poison pills are basically defenses built into contracts to prevent deals from going through. The poison pill Twitter's board release says that if anyone acquires more than 15% of the company, that shareholders would be allowed to purchase more shares at a discounted price, around half of the current share price. This dilutes the share count by creating more shares, meaning that anybody trying to buy the entire company Elon Musk, to buy back all of these additional shares being created. Right now, Twitter stock trades with a total valuation of $37 billion. This is actually a lot lower than where they traded last year when they hit an all-time high around $77 per share, which is a $61 billion market cap. So, is Elon's offer to buy the entire company for $43 billion a good offer? Well, when we look at how the company has performed over the past 10 years, it's really not very impressive. While revenue has grown from $2.4 billion in 2017 to $5 billion this year, the company still hasn't turned a profit. However, in 2021, they paid $765 million due to a lawsuit over allegations that they misled investors about how much the user base was growing. They would have turned a profit of about $500 million if it wasn't for this payout. Now, looking at the forecasted earnings for the company, analysts do expect Twitter to be profitable in 2022. And by 2024, they expect Twitter to earn about $1 billion in profits. Now, looking at the revenue growth, we can see that Twitter's growth slowed down a lot after 2015, but analysts still see at least 17% growth going forward. So using a conservative 14% growth rate, this should put Twitter's fair value around a PE of 29, and if we go by the minimum growth forecasted, 17% growth puts Twitter's fair value at around $30 38 times earnings. Now looking at this valuation charted out, this puts Twitter's valuation by the end of 2022 between $25 and $32 per share. The current share price of $49 won't hit fair value until sometime between 2023 and 2024, which is definitely expensive with all of the rest of the Nasdaq sitting at really cheap prices right now. And Elon's offer of $5,420 is around the high end of their fair value by 2024. So according to my valuation, this is actually a fantastic offer from Elon to buy all of Twitter. And even when we look at Twitter's historical price to sales ratio, it seems like they've averaged somewhere between 5 to 10, with a few short spikes going above that range. With the last year bringing in about $5 billion and Elon's offer at $43 billion, this comes out to about 8.5 times sales, which seems like a pretty fair price. Since Twitter is starting to turn the corner towards becoming a profitable company, the PE ratio is probably going to be a more reliable number than the price to sales ratio, so I wouldn't rely on the price to sales ratio to value the company as much going forward here. Overall, Elon's offer is a very good deal to shareholders, and they actually should feel pretty lucky to be able to exit their positions at this high of a price relative to Twitter's underlying fundamentals. But the Twitter board seems poised to do everything they can to stop this from happening. So a great question is, why do they fight this so hard? They have very small positions in the company, they seem to do a pretty poor job of monetizing Twitter, and they aren't getting paid. Wait, what? Yeah, so it turns out that they're actually getting paid around $250,000 to $300,000 a year just to work basically a part-time job sitting on Twitter's board and make decisions on a company that they otherwise have very little invested into. For some of these board members, for example, David Rosenblatt, he's worth $7 billion, so this salary is really nothing to his overall financial situation. However, for Fei-Fei Li, the Stanford professor, well, Stanford professors earn on average about $250,000 a year, and I wasn't able to find her net worth exactly, but this board salary at least doubles her earnings per year if she's not making money from other things. So if you're looking for other reasons why Twitter shouldn't sell to Elon, protecting $250,000 from flowing into your pockets relatively easily is a pretty good reason why. But just to be clear here, I have no idea what their internal positions are within the board as they discuss this offer. And I'm definitely not accusing Fei-Fei Li of breaching her fiduciary responsibilities for her own personal reasons. What I'm saying is, if there was a bad faith motivation to prevent the deal from going through, this could be a reason why. The other big reason, and probably the elephant in the room, is the political leanings of the board members. While it doesn't seem like any of them are tweeting anything too crazy, it definitely does look like the board members who are more active on Twitter tend to lean on the political spectrum a little bit to the left. And Elon does make a pretty good point about Twitter being the de facto public square for addressing political issues. It wouldn't surprise me if there is a little bit of motivation to prevent Elon Musk, who is probably a little bit center-right libertarian leaning, from gaining control of this massive communications platform. But the fiduciary responsibility of the Twitter board members aren't to protect their own political interests, they're to protect the long-term interests of the shareholders, which means that looking at who they're selling to should not be taken into account when deciding if they're going to accept a deal from Elon Musk. While the board says that they're just trying to get the best deal for shareholders, to me it seems most likely that they just don't want to sell to Elon and they're trying to do everything they can to prevent the deal from going through. Putting aside all the issues around free speech and censorship, $43 billion is more than a fair offer for all of Twitter. The board members themselves hardly control any stock in the company, and they still take in around $250,000 to $300,000 a year in their annual salaries. I can't say what exactly the Twitter board is going to do next, but Elon has already secured the financing needed to buy the entire company for $43 billion using Tesla stock and debt as collateral. I assume that the Twitter board is going to continue to act in total dysfunction, but ultimately, I do expect that Elon is going to buy all of Twitter, come hell or high water, to the benefit of the shareholders and in spite of the board of directors. Now, before you go, make sure you check out this great video here about what the Fed is going to have to do to get inflation under control. And as always, thanks for watching.